insane even to me saying that. So I appreciate the invite here to talk to everybody about what we've done, what we've done right, what we've done wrong, and just to get to this point and see kind of what the future holds a little bit. But the first thing I wanted to get into, before talking about Splinterlands specifically, was like what is Web3, what is blockchain, like why are we here? Because I feel like I go to a lot of these events and I feel like a lot of people in the space, they just don't really know. And it's just like, oh, blockchain, it's awesome. You just have blockchain and you just have NFTs and they're great. But people, even in the space, just I feel like don't really know why, and that's at the heart of like what Splinterlands was and why we launched it. I mean, does anyone, I'll put it out to the group, does anyone have like one word to describe like what the value of blockchain is? Just shout out any words.
Immutable.
All right, that's a good one.
Ownership.
Bar's heard me talk before, he cheated, I think. Yeah, I would say it's ownership. Ownership is the thing. See, what people don't realize there's been this like sly behind the scenes change in the world as things went digital, where all of a sudden nobody owns anything anymore. Everything used to be physical, so ownership was like obvious. You bought something from a store and you had it. Money was physical bills, something you could hand to someone. So ownership was not complicated or confusing, it was just very obvious. And all of a sudden everything went digital, from like collectibles to data to money itself. And people don't realize like there was so many benefits of that, but one of the problems was you don't own anything anymore, including your money. The banks own your money. It's like, other than taking out physical bills, which very few people do, and a lot of places don't even accept cash anymore, and that's a trend we're going to be seeing. You can't actually hold your own money. It's not possible. If people say like, oh, money's being pulled out of the banks, guess where it's going? To other banks, to other financial institutions. You can't, other than physical bills, actually take your money out of a bank, which means you don't actually own it. If you want to do anything with it, you have to ask the bank. Now, typically in the US, we're lucky that the bank says okay most of the time. But especially a lot of places around the world, and increasingly in the US, the bank doesn't say okay, or the bank says, oops, we lost all your money. So it's a thing that like most people don't realize, is that as the world went digital, ownership has just dropped. And okay, who cares? Well, who cares is because ownership is how you build wealth. Ownership is how you build power. It's the American dream. You don't rent a house, that's not the American dream. You buy a house, you own a house, right? So I don't think it's surprising at all that we see this big wealth gap that's growing and growing between the rich and the poor, the haves, the have-nots, because the rich are the people who are now owning everything. And the general population who used to own things much more, now they don't. And that's a lot of that has become the digital transformation. So, and I don't blame, the companies that started making all these digital products, because there was actually no way for people to own things digitally. It just was not possible. Companies would just have this database that they run that tracks who has what, and that means basically the companies own everything. Banks have a database of who has what money. They own all the money. There was no actual technical way to do it until Bitcoin, until blockchain. So that's what it is. That's what there's all this mining and digital signatures and all this stuff, but what it all really leads to is digital asset ownership. It is now possible, because of blockchain, to own digital assets. So that's what this whole Web3 thing is. It's like, okay, wait a minute. We had all these Web2 where a few companies and organizations own everything. Now we have the technical capability for people to own assets. How do we kind of transition the businesses to this model? So this is exactly what started Splinterlands. So I was a big Magic the Gathering player as a kid. Those of you who know it, it's a physical trading card game. You go to the store, you buy a pack of cards, you open it, you get a bunch of different cards, you play a game against your friends, you can trade them, you can buy them, you can sell them, etc. I was lucky, not smart in this case, just lucky, that I kept most of the cards from when I was a kid, and they have become valuable collector items now, right? So that was just, that's a consequence of owning things, right? Since I bought those cards physically, I owned them, so that means now I could resell them, right? And if you think about it, just think about the concept of like used things. So we have eBay, right? People are just buying and selling used things. And all that money, except for like the eBay fees, is not going to a company or corporation, it's going to people who own things, right? That's a ton of money, and when things went digital, all that got taken away. So I use like, cars as an example. Just imagine like cars somehow went digital, and there was no more used car markets. You couldn't buy a car, you just had to sort of rent it from the car companies. And all of a sudden, all the value that everyone in the world has in their cars is gone. It all goes to the car companies. Fantastic for car companies, really bad for everyone else. And that's what happened with like every industry that went digital, from money to gaming to whatever. So with Splinterlands, I had these magic cards. I knew the value of ownership. And then I played digital games. I spent more money than I'd like to admit on, the Clash of Clans and Hearthstone and whatever it was. And I didn't realize it at the time when I was doing it, but at some point I stopped playing Hearthstone and I stopped playing Clash of Clans. And I had no collection of things that could be valuable collector's items later. I couldn't resell them to anyone. So everyone who comes into those games new has to pay the company. They can't pay me, right? So again, great for these gaming companies and all these companies, like they're just making all the money. But that's what centralization does. It centralizes the wealth and it centralizes the power. So that's what blockchain is all about, is distributing the wealth and distributing the power. And I personally, as a gamer, wanted to have a game that worked that way. I wanted to have a digital game because like there's so many cool things you can do digitally that you can't do physically. So I wanted to have a digital game where it worked like physical stuff, where I could own the things, where if new people came into the game and I didn't want to play it anymore, I could sell my stuff to them. They didn't have to pay the company. And that's like just the ground floor of asset ownership. With blockchain, we take it even to another level where you have, we were talking about DAOs earlier and LinksDAO and all these things. DAOs are decentralized organizations. So now we got this concept like, holy cow, not only can I own assets in this game that's Splinterlands, but you can actually own the game, right? You can be an owner in this decentralized organization. And so it was just so cool to me as a gamer. Again, this was not like, oh, here's a way we can integrate a new fad and make a bunch of money as a business, or release an NFT and just get a bunch of money up front. It was me as a gamer, like I wanted this product. Like I wanted the opportunity to own assets in a game and also own the game itself. And you can take that to, when you consider the whole concept of owning the game itself and blockchain, the way blockchain achieves ownership, one of the ways, is through everything being public, everything being open source. So all the data is public, all the data is open. And that again, it gives more power to the users. So like I use an example, let's say you don't like something about Facebook or Twitter or whatever. I'm sure we could all name a million things we don't like about those platforms. And so some entrepreneurs say, I'm making a new Facebook, right? I'm making a better Facebook. And it's going to do all these things that are better, that people like more. There's almost a zero chance that they're actually going to compete with Facebook, because Facebook owns all the data, they have the billions of users, they have everything. You're starting from scratch. But the whole idea with blockchain-based projects is that everything is public, everything is open source. So it's if Facebook worked like that, you could fork Facebook. You could copy the whole thing, all the software, all the tech, all the data, start your own platform that you change whatever you want about how it works. But now people have a more equal choice. They can use either platform. Both of them have all their friends, all their data, all their pictures. They all have the software, they all scale, etc. And so all of a sudden, all these different options spring up and people can choose. It gives a lot of power to the end users to kind of pick and choose the best platforms. And it makes Facebook have to compete against all these other copies of the platform. They have to make sure their version is better. They can't just rely on their moat, that they have as they build up all these users. So that's ultimately what I'm excited about and want to see with Splinterlands. From a corporate perspective, that can be scary, right? This stuff is kind of scary for corporations, the ones who were benefiting from all this centralization of power over the years. But here, my goal is less about maintaining power for the corporation and seeing if we can just build an overall better product by giving all the power back to all the users that participate, including the ability to fork the product, make their own copies, make their own changes. There are even other games that people have built that use the Splinterlands assets and NFTs. So if you don't really like our game that we built so much, you go play this other game. But it still ultimately benefits us because it gives more value to our tokens and our assets that benefits the whole ecosystem. So it's just, more on a fundamental level. I hope everyone understands that that's what this space is about. And I hope everyone that's working to build a business in this space thinks about it from that way. It's not just take Web2 business and throw some NFTs or throw a token on there, right? It's really start from scratch and think about how we can remake businesses in a way that distributes the value to everyone in the ecosystem. And us as a corporation, right, we also participate in the ecosystem. We gain a lot of value. The bigger the ecosystem grows, the more we can benefit, but we benefit as a part of the ecosystem, not as a controller of the ecosystem, right? So that's a big difference. We're just one part of this ecosystem that we want to help grow with everyone else. We're not like a traditional company where we control the entire ecosystem, right? And that's a big difference. And ultimately, even though it's scary as a company, we don't control everything, right? Ultimately, I think people are going to start to wake up more and more to the value of that, to the value of, hey, wait, I'm not going to spend all this time doing all this crap online or paying all this money for things where I don't own anything and it's just all going to companies. Can I do it in a way where I benefit from my participation? And so ultimately, if that's a better product for users, and they talked about the usability and all the issues around there, that stuff is going to get worked out over time. And ultimately, this is just going to be the better thing. When users can have ownership stake in their assets and the products they use, they're going to choose those over the others. And so that's why, that's what I do. And that's why I'm really excited to be a part of this community and see everything that everybody's building. So I'm not going to take too much time. I wanted to open it up for some questions. So let me know, if you guys have anything you want to ask. Oh, shoot.
Yeah, so you said you started in 2018, right? Mm-hmm. So how much iteration on the original smart contracts had to be done? Because I'm sure tons has changed since then.
Tons and tons has changed. So we actually, I'll give a quick little story about that. When we launched in 2018, kind of Ethereum was the only real option there as far as a smart contract blockchain. And we didn't want to use Ethereum because we really wanted to focus on the user experience. And so we ended up building on what's now the Hive blockchain, which is not even a smart contract chain. So we had to build our own layer 2 semi-smart contract platform on top of Hive. But it allows us, Hive has no gas fees. It allows us to stake tokens and provide the bandwidth for our users. It has account abstraction and all kinds of other things that make it a much smoother, easier experience for people to come in on. The one advantage is that it made it a lot easier for us to constantly add and upgrade things, right? Because it's sort of like our own platform that we've built. But yeah, we constantly are constantly adding new features, changing things. But more recently, now that we have a DAO, most of the changes happen through a governance vote, right? So the better you are at the game, the more assets you have, the more governance tokens you earn. And if you choose to stake those governance tokens, you get to propose changes and vote on changes. So now a lot of the changes, or the majority, happen as a result of community proposals and votes that lead to them getting implemented, which is again, part of the, something that was totally not possible or didn't exist before blockchain.
Is that gameplay changes, or is it more you know what I mean?
It's every kind of change. So there's gameplay changes, there's tokenomics changes, there's reward changes. It's really anything. And so, there was a lot of talk about NFTs and dynamic NFTs and all these things, but what I don't think that some people realize is that NFTs can do anything that you want them to do, right? They can be programmed in any way. And ultimately if, so the NFTs in Splinterlands could change in the sense that how the cards interact in the game or what they do. But But ultimately, that's the cool thing is that if people don't like the changes, people have the option to sort of like fork the game and make their own version where the cards didn't change or do something different. I mean, it's just like the example of the Ethereum fork with the DAO, right? So a bunch of people in the Ethereum network wanted to undo this hack that happened, a bunch of people didn't, right? There were two forks and people could choose whichever one, and whichever one got more people and more value into it, that's what went forward. And that's what we're doing with gaming, which is so cool. So, we take, people put their input and they vote. So typically if the votes pass, it typically means the majority of the community wants to go in this direction, but it's open to other people to make their own forks or their own changes, and if everyone likes that, they can go that direction. Back.
So what would you say is the biggest challenge of an open source governance platform like a DAO, right? What is the real rub that you come up against in voting?
It's hard to pick which one is the biggest challenge. There are tons of challenges, and there's tons of things that are scary because we don't really know yet. So a lot of people when we first kind of started turning things over to the DAO, a lot of people were scared and they're like, oh my gosh, there's so many crazies in the Discord that like have all these ridiculous ideas, right? And I was like, yeah, that's true. But as a community, like are those crazy ideas? Just because someone spouts it out in Discord, does that mean the community as a whole is going to majority vote for that, right? And so far it's been the case that it's actually pretty hard to get a DAO proposal passed. It has to have pretty overwhelming support, and it has to be pretty clearly a benefit for the game. So that's been good, but it's scary because we don't know what might happen, and that's my job and my business. We have employees that work for our business, and in theory, some crazy things could be voted for and happen that would negatively affect our business, and we're sort of trusting that the community is incentivized with us, right? If our business doesn't do well that's building the game, it hurts everyone who has assets in the game and who's voting on these things. So that's scary. All the legal stuff is really scary. We pay a ton in lawyer fees to try to make sure what we're doing is on the up and up. But ultimately, like from my perspective of like the ultimate goal is if the whole thing becomes a DAO, right? And my goal is that our company will end up just being a contractor hired by the DAO, right? So the DAO decides they want a new feature in the game, they hire us to build it. Maybe they'll hire someone else, I don't know. And from that perspective, a lot of the legal worries go away. And that's something that's really exciting to me. And that's also the power of a decentralized organization that couldn't really happen before.
I have a perspective on like the future of video games as kind of like how anybody has a YouTube channel now, that we're building tools where anybody can build their own video game. Do you share the idea of the accessibility of video games in a way that's like analogous to anyone having a YouTube channel? Do you think like tools are gonna get there? And if so, how far away do you think it is from being more accessible?
Yes, I guess I never thought of it as being like as easy as a YouTube channel, but it is getting easier and easier to build a video game. But I think that what the blockchain adds to that is again with my Facebook example, you're not just like building a new video game and then starting from scratch. As blockchain-based video games grow and they're open source and all the data is publicly available on the blockchain, you could build a game that uses Splinterlands assets or assets from other games. And so everyone who's a Splinterlands player already has stuff in your game, right? So it's like you just, and you didn't have access to that before. You don't have access to the Clash of Clans data and their entire user base. You can't just airdrop stuff to all of them. So I think blockchain makes it easier, not necessarily to build the games, but that is getting easier just with technology and AI. But then to just like kind of fork an existing game and take their whole community and everything and start at a more even footing than from the ground.
Yeah, I didn't think about it like that, but that's helpful.
Arman?
I guess I had a step on or a question about the list that say a DAO or the DAO proposes something, like a team change, input change, a new world or whatever, what is that like final step? You just like roll it out, or then does the DAO have to like approve the pull request or something, or like, what's that final step look like?
Alright, so that's a nuanced question because we are in the process of getting to the full vision that we have. So right now, the DAO approves something, and for the most part, we have to then go build that and implement it. So it's still on us to choose to do that or not. So at some point when the full, we're working towards the entire game servers, operating it, being open source and run sort of like Bitcoin miners, right? Everyone can independently, or not miners, but the Bitcoin node software. So where everyone can independently run the Splinterlands software. So then, if the DAO proposes a change, or even if they don't, like anyone could just make any change and propose new software that works a different way. And then if the majority of the community chooses to run that software, that will get implemented. So we are not there yet, but that's the goal. And that's how it is like truly decentralized, right? It's anyone can build changes into the software however they want, and it's up to the community that's running the software to choose whether or not to implement it or not.
Yeah, so has Splinterlands ever considered moving to like a different network like the Optimism like super chain that's going on now, something like that, or are you sticking with like the Hive blockchain for the future?
Yeah, we get asked that almost on a weekly basis, I would say. I mean, it's been 5 years, there's been so many, oh, this is the new thing, whatever. And some of them even offer grants to come move our whole thing over there. In my opinion, we have a really good setup going, the way we have it, so I would see no real reason to make a huge move like that. I mean, it'd be a totally upending move, we'd have to rebuild most of the product, all our accounts and data and things would have to be moved over, it'd be a real mess. So what we do instead, because there are obviously other ecosystems that are very valuable, is we build a lot of bridges. So with our tokens, there are bridges to like Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain and Polygon soon. And for the NFTs, one of our biggest bridges is to the Wax blockchain, which is, it does a lot of gaming NFT focused things. And it's to the point, which I talk about with a lot of people, that a lot of people think our game is on the Wax blockchain because they buy assets there and then they bring them into the game and they play with it. They don't realize we're not running on the Wax blockchain. And I think that's ultimately the real goal again, is that the technology is behind the scenes, which they've talked about on the last panel. And it's not about which blockchain is it on. It's, people can get the assets or interact with them on whatever blockchain they want, and they can just bridge it into the game, and they can just play there. They don't have to worry about what chain it runs on.
So as there is a proliferation of chains and bridges and different authorities essentially, so each chain is its own authority to what the record is. How do you see the social contract evolving where, what happens on another chain isn't honored on another chain? Like how does that ecosystem evolve? Right now everyone's kind of willing to, like you say, when there's a fork, they kind of all agree on the history that social contract has held up, but that wouldn't logically need to be the case, especially with the proliferation of smaller chains with smaller groups that may differ on that. Do you see that as a risk at all?
Yeah, well, bridges in general are a huge risk. I mean, that's almost every hack that happens is a bridge hack, right? So ultimately, it's important to understand what the authority chain is. Like you take Bitcoin, there's wrapped Bitcoin on every chain, right? So you have to understand the risks of getting wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum versus getting Bitcoin, actual Bitcoin on the base network. And the good thing about the transparency is, you should be able to easily audit if there's, 1 million wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum, there should be a wallet address with 1 million wrapped Bitcoin in it that you can check and you can see how that's managed, right? Is it one person with a key? Is it some type of decentralized thing or whatever? So unfortunately, at this point, you have to kind of be careful and knowledgeable if you're using wrapped assets on a different chain and understand the risks and vulnerabilities. I'm hoping and guessing that over time there will be just kind of more standard ways that are more secure to do that, and then those will be quickly adopted. But right now it's personal responsibility when you're using wrapped assets on different chains. Suarez?
going back to like the ownership, I had a question, I guess it's a curious question, but a personal question. When you started off at the beginning and you wanted to make sure you curated the game for ownership, did you think about that process like, I'm gonna make sure that this game is like really fun and the benefit is ownership? Or were you just like, I'm gonna make sure I build a game and ownership is like the narrative that I'm gonna give to everybody? Or was it just like you kind of like curated the game and just got, like you said, you got lucky with holding those cards and you sold later for higher value, and it just happened that the market was good at the time? How did that kind of combine with your thought process?
Yeah, I'd say it's both, right? So you can't just say, oh, here's something and you can own it, and everyone will say we don't care, right? So it had to start, there was talk on the previous panel also, you have to have a product that people want, period. That's the number one thing, right? So we built, Splinterlands is not just like a copy of an existing Web 2 game. I've been a game developer and a designer professionally most of my life. So this was a game concept, a unique game concept that I had long before I knew about crypto, and this was just the opportunity to launch it. But I've also launched my own games previously, and there was just no way I could compete with the Zyngas and the EAs of the world, right? So by adding in the blockchain and the ownership, it was a way that we were able to stand out. So we had a unique game that people liked and were interested in, so they cared to own the things. Plus, they were actually able to own the things which they couldn't do in the other games from the other companies. And so it was like those two things coming together, I think, which was what led us to be successful. I don't know what our time's looking like, but a couple more questions?
Last question.
Okay.
Do you think you could be successful if you only have like a small percentage of the gamers who are using ownership, and let's say 95% stay with the big companies, and only 5% of gamers come to like your model, where the gamers themselves are ownership? Can you still be successful with only small part of the market?
Well, I'd say we definitely have a smaller part of the market right now, and it's doing pretty well generally. I mean, obviously markets go up and down, but so the difference. One of the differences is that people will spend a lot more money when they own assets, right? You look at things more of an investment than otherwise. So it's if you're just like spending money for entertainment versus buying assets that you will own and can potentially appreciate in value. People are open to putting more money in, right? That's why when I kind of realized this concept when we were starting to design this game, I was like, man, if this existed, I would just put so much money into it, because it's, I felt bad putting so much money into traditional games because I knew like I have a son and I'm going to retire someday, and I'm like, man, I'm spending all this money in Clash of Clans. It's just like really not a good thing that I should be doing. But now I have the opportunity where like I buy all this stuff in Splinterlands and other NFTs and all these things, and I'm like, this is both fun stuff that I enjoy doing, and I can potentially be saving for retirement, sort of like what happened with my Magic the Gathering cards at the same time. So I'm much more willing to like take a bigger jump into it. So I think you can, but the whole point of that was I think you can be much more successful even with a smaller percent of the population than like traditional games.
Right. I was thinking that because like I use Linux on my machine because I just found Microsoft so frustrating. But if you look, Linux is only about 17% of the operating systems, and the other 80+% is the Microsoft Windows. But Linux I think Linux will be around because like a lot of people, they don't want to use Linux.
And it's growing.
And I'm thinking, are you in the same boat? Let's say you never get more than 10% of the gamers. Will you be able to survive with that?
I think that'll be fine, but I think it will continue to grow until it's the majority. But I don't know. I think we're only allowed one more question, Sharon. So
Last time I checked, traditionally gamers have actually been the biggest gamers of NFTs.
yeah,
What's your take on that? Why is that?
well, it's totally not surprising. I mean, if you're a gamer and you see all this news and media and press saying, oh, there's these new blockchain games with NFTs and all this stuff, and you look into it, and the games are typically horrible because they're really just like gamified yield farming. And then you see a bunch of people selling monkey pictures for millions of dollars, and you're like, what is going on here? This is a total scam. Like a lot of it is actual scams. There's that. So like if you just look at it from that lens, yeah, it's a total ridiculous, stupid scam that you don't want anything to do with. And I get that. Underlying all that nonsense is all the stuff that I just talked about, which is really fundamentally better. So I think it just takes time for the better projects to build up and more people to slowly, oh yeah, let me try it a little bit and get in, and then more people are gonna see, okay, there seem to be some better projects now, there's some people I know now that tried it and like it. So it's a slow thing, and I think that's just, with any new technology or any new thing, it just takes time. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Looking forward to the rest of the talk today.